Attention, dear listeners. Do you feel the weight of your forest school sins bearing down upon your soul? Have you hidden a drum because you couldn't handle the noise anymore? Have you lied about the hot chocolate powder being finished? Fear not, for redemption is at hand. We bring you Forgive Me Forest School on the Forest School podcast. Each episode, we, your humble forest school gurus, will absolve you of your nature-based transgressions. Simply visit theforestschoolpodcast.com, linked in the show notes, and submit your forest school confession. Together, we will find absolution, laughter, and a renewed commitment to the forest school way of life. Don't miss this opportunity to cleanse your conscience and connect with a community of imperfect nature lovers just like you. Send your transgressions in to us at theforestschoolpodcast.com and enjoy the experience of being forgiven for your forest school sins. Amen. You're listening to the Forest School Podcast. Delicious waffle chat about education, nature connection, child development, community building, and lots more. Hosted by Lewis Ames and Wem Sutherden. Just boom, boom, boom. Boom. It'd be good if it. When I was at. Hello, listeners. When the bell ringing is going off at the church 100 meters from my house. It's just reminded me, though, that when I was a teacher, there was a period of time where the school bell stopped working, and it was such a small village that the church bell rang instead because it was slightly across the road, but it just meant that it was weirdly Enid Blyton-y because it was like, oh, it's the end of break time. Bong!
Yeah.
It's the end. It's too big.
Serious.
Too big. Listeners, we're here with Nina Lovelace. Nina, you are, what are we chatting about? We're chatting about urban forest school. I'm going to start with the loaded term. I know you've written in the show notes that you loaded term and potentially dicey. I'm going to go with urban forest school.
Yeah, I'm fine with urban forest school. Who isn't fine with urban forest school? Well, do you want to explain a little bit about your work, Nina, and about maybe why you said maybe you wouldn't class it as pure forest school for a certain reason, but maybe you were. I don't know. Yeah, explain a little bit about what you get up to in Hackney.
Yeah, so I think the reason why I thought it might be worth us having a bit of a chat is I do urban forest school. I call it that. Not everybody does. But effectively, I'm working in schools a lot of the time. We do have trees, we do have growing spaces, we do have those things, but we also have a lot of tarmac in a lot of my places, and we also have a lot of astroturf in quite a few of those places. And it's quite interesting because I think I did my forest school leader training not too long ago, really. But I speak to a lot of people, and they do work in schools. They work in schools a lot. So the beautiful ideal of working in the woodland doesn't really happen for some of us, especially if we're working in cities. And I would never call what I do forest school because of the sixth principle. We're not in a natural environment. We're not in a woodland, so that wouldn't be right to say that. But equally, I do speak to quite a few leaders who work in playgrounds, and sometimes I feel like they're almost apologising for it. And I don't think that's necessary, to be honest. I really don't think we should. And I also think people are doing some amazing work in cities. And the reason I call it urban forest school is because it's not forest school, but it's really not that far away from it. It is a little sister, you could say, or a pragmatic approach to some of the challenges we have. And I felt like it might be quite a good thing to have a bit of a conversation about it. And it's worth saying this is just my take, because I know some people can get quite upset about it. So I'm not saying it's, what I'm saying is the absolute truth on it, but I do think there's some really interesting conversations to be had about it.
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you for getting in touch, because, as you say, lots of listeners will be in a similar situation. Absolutely. So, I mean, those people who might not know where Hackney is, it's in London, and it's in a very built up, very urban part of London, not too far from the centre, really. So, very far away from kind of fields. Although you have got kind of Hackney marshes and things like that, haven't you? But most of the children, let's be honest, who are, you're going to be working with, won't necessarily be going out to big green spaces or to woodland. Things like Epping Forest is like an ancient woodland that isn't very far away, but when you live in a city like that, you don't tend to gravitate very far away from the place where you live. In the main, that might be a huge generalisation for a lot of people, but yeah, so people such as yourself who are doing this work in schools or in parks and things are probably going to be the, you know, quite a rare chance for a lot of these children and families to engage in this type of education, realistically.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I do think that we reach kids and families perhaps who would never even consider going to full fat forest school. So that's another kind of point, because I do see it as potentially complementary. And if it's very close to forest school, which I believe what I do is, it's a stepping stone, and we can definitely then perhaps encourage those kids, and let's face it, mainly their parents, to maybe get on the train and head off to Epping Forest, or visit the park a little bit more. Because if their kids are coming home and saying, "Oh wow, I saw this amazing butterfly," or I learnt about mushrooms today, and there's a really weird one, that's red with white dots. Can we go and see it? That isn't that amazing if we can do that. But I also think there's something about, there are so many playgrounds which once upon a time were probably quite green, but over the last 20 years have been largely tarmacked over. And people like myself are some of the best people to go into those places and try and renature them. This is the other thing. We're never going to recreate Epping Forest in the middle of Hackney, because that wouldn't be right. We're trying to get the right balance between kids' play and urban kind of renaturing. But I do think we can do a lot in really small spaces. And that's another thing I thought would be good to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been part of a project like that. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah, definitely. So I work in a few schools now, a few in Hackney, one in Highbury, one in Westminster, and also one in Hammersmith. And they're all quite different. But none of the sites are perfect, none of them. And when I say perfect, in that I still see the site as almost a colleague. If I can improve and develop it, my life is going to be easier, as well as it's going to be a better experience for the kids. So I'm always really interested in how we can develop them. And there's varying kinds of potential, either in the site, but also what kind of support we might be able to get to improve it. But the big project I've been working on this year is William Patten School, which is in Stoke Newington. And I've been working with them doing effectively Nature Club for the last couple of years, and it's been quite a challenge working in the playground, because there's been limited nature there, in all honesty. And I was like, okay, what do I really want my CIC to be about? And I was like, you know what, I really would love it to be about renaturing urban spaces. So I went to the head teacher and I said, look, I'd really love it if we could work together to make this place better for the kids. And because we already had a good relationship and she trusted me, she was very open. She was like, yeah, what do you think we could do, Nina? Go and come up with a plan, and let's consider it. So I worked with a good friend, Claudia, who is, this is the other thing. Once you start to dig around who's interested in renaturing, in London particularly, loads of people come out of the woodwork, absolutely loads. And there's a really great charity called Growing Green London, who I got in contact with and said, look, can you help me to come up with a plan for William Patten? And so we went in, we came up with a plan, we costed it. And then effectively at the start of this year, I started to try and raise the money for it, because it wasn't going to be a cheap thing. We've got 165 square metres of astroturf that we need to get rid of, first for starters, and recycle. But then once we get rid of it, we need to put soil in, we need to put wood chip in. We don't have an outdoor shelter there. And obviously we want to keep the kids outdoors as much as possible. So, et cetera, et cetera. Long and short of it is we launched an auction, an online auction in, I think it was the start of March. We raised £6,500 from that. We then put that money into a crowdfunder, which Aviva has very kindly matched, and we're currently at almost £16,000. And we haven't relied on any grants at all for that. That's just been really trying to be clear about what we were trying to do and work really hard with the local community. And it's been amazing. Loads of people have helped. And I'm not saying that everyone can find it that, well, I was about to say easy. It hasn't been easy. It really does depend on what support you get from the school and also how the local community is going to respond. But we're really proud of what we've done. And this summer, we're going to transform that playground into a proper urban forest school site.
That's amazing. I've never heard of anybody. We've all spoken with forest school colleagues who, are like kind of tearing their hair out about the sites that they're having to work on, and and the challenges of working in schools. Obviously, the benefits are enormous. The benefits for working and for the children of delivering it, but there are a lot of challenges, aren't there? When you say, as you say, working on tarmac playgrounds, or things that you've got in the playground that you wish weren't there, and things that you wish were there and just aren't. But I've never actually heard of a project to convert a playground with AstroTurf into a wild space. Lots of chat about kind of maximalising any small bit of wild space that a school might have and things, but that's really, really ambitious. I was wondering about because you've also got a corporate background as well, haven't you? And you don't just work in forest school, and I was just wondering whether you feel like some of the skills you've learnt there, or maybe the ways of working and maybe the contacts you have kind of supported you in that plan and that project to fundraise to do something quite so ambitious.
This episode of the Forest School podcast is brought to you again by the fantastic Forest Tawi stove, as available from the guys over at carbonfarmers.world. This is honestly the ultimate tool for setting up fires with an outdoor education group of any kind. So it's got 3 different cooking surfaces, it's smoke free, and also allows you to get the most out of your fire so that you can be as efficient as possible. The Forest Tawi stove, you can demonstrate the whole carbon cycle because you turn the organic material of the sticks into charcoal. You can make charcoal crayons. You can put the charcoal into your compost bin and stuff and get rid of all the odours. Plus, it makes biochar as you're working. So I was reading this on their website. If you make 1 kilo of biochar, you have saved 3 kilos of carbon from going into the atmosphere. So the Forest Tawi is a carbon neutral stove, which is amazing. If one of your focuses with your outdoor groups is teaching about climate change or about sustainability, then you can literally demonstrate capturing carbon and keeping it from going into the atmosphere with this stove every time you have a fire. The Forest Tawi stove is honestly a must-have for anybody that's working with groups outdoors. So like I say, if you go to carbonfarmers.world, you can pick up one of these stoves, and honestly, it will change your outdoor sessions for the best. Thank you so much to the guys at Forest Tawi for sponsoring this episode.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, ambitious can sometimes, move into foolhardy, but I'm kind of somebody who's always been, let's give it a go. What's the worst that can happen? But definitely, I come from a media background. I used to work at The Guardian and I worked at The Times. Once was employed by Rupert Murdoch. I'm used to dealing with difficult situations. So I'm not afraid of going out and asking for money, I guess. And so I definitely think that has helped. And I have raised money as well. I used to have a tech startup where I had to go out and try and raise money from angel investors. So this to me wasn't, in a way, this was much nicer because I was going out to the community and trying to develop, raise money for something as wholesome and hopeful as a new, sort of renatured playground. But yes, definitely. And the other thing is, I was going to say, I've just mentioned that I had to have the backing from the head teacher. We've also had the backing from the PTFA and parents. But another really important part of this is I have gone out and I found one corporate who will lend hands, who will volunteer. And because we can't always rely on people to be where we need them to be, to rip up 165 square metres of AstroTurf. So I'm working with a corporate called Colt in Shoreditch, who very kindly, when I ask them, they send people to help me. And what's more, they actually pay my CSE for that under their corporate social responsibility budget. But what I'm doing is I'm finding them interesting volunteering opportunities where they also learn things. It's not just, because I went and spoke to a few corporates and they said, oh, we've got budget to spend on helping with this type of thing. But we want to do more than a litter pick. We want to do something meaningful, and we want to do, obviously litter picking is meaningful, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
So every time they come and do some volunteering with me on one of my sites, they go away learning something new, effectively. So that could be, the other week we were drilling logs to create habitats, for example. So yes, long answer to your question, but I definitely do think that corporate background has helped me.
Do you think that model is, because as I'm listening to this and I've got your website up on my other screen here, and I'm looking through it, and I think, oh, this is amazing, and there's so much, like you're saying, canvassing and asking for money and doing all these things, and I'm thinking, do you think there's more scope for sort of popularizing? I mean, without going into like necessarily numbers, but I'm assuming that this project is like your CIC is being paid to do this work. You are being paid for your time in some way. Have I got the right end of the stick there?
Actually, no. The way I make my money is through largely after school clubs, running kind of paid sessions. The CIC bit, the bit which I am putting back into my community, is this kind of consultancy and project management for these types of projects. And of course, it helps that I'm being paid by a corporate to provide them with some CSR opportunities. But I'm deliberately trying not to charge anything, if at all, for the renaturing. But bear in mind that I'm working with these sites anyway. So by working and improving the sites, that gives me more opportunity to do more. So this is definitely a win-win type approach. If I can have a site which has an outdoor shelter, if I can have a site that has a herb garden, then I can start to perhaps do herbalism sessions there. I can perhaps work with the school where we open it up at weekends, where we perhaps can do adult work. So does that make sense? I'm really trying to do something where everybody wins, bearing in mind that schools don't have much money, and a lot of the time they don't, they haven't got time to think about how they renature their playground. If state school, they're worrying about if they've got enough to pay their staff. So, I have to be realistic. Where's the money going to come from? So I focus on the smart areas to get my money actually paid. And then I put time into my sites where I've got skin in the game.
Yeah, that's a benefit of living in a more, and practicing in a more urban area, isn't it? That you have also got that proximity to companies that might have little pots of money sloshing around. That, as you say, as opposed to most of us are probably more au fait with the grant giving bodies and funding and things like that, which is great, but are hard to get hold of, and also those funds dry up. And if you're cultivating relationships with bigger kind of corporate companies, and then, as you say, you're getting both the money and the people, the hands, and it's almost like you're kind of you could always see those people as forest school participants as well, couldn't you? As you say, they're coming along, they're making a habitat, they're learning something. It's almost like you're delivering a little taster of forest school to people who would usually be in a much more corporate environment. And how would they, as you're talking about sort of introducing children and families who live in urban areas to this other world of forest school and nature connection, and you're actually doing that for these corporate people too, which is
no, absolutely. And another really great win is that sometimes the corporate are looking for an opportunity, and none of my sites need work that month. So the other thing is I've got some very good friends who also have sites that need work. So I send my corporate over to help them. And then I make sure that what the corporate pays me, they get some of that money. Because as long as they're guiding and they're supporting the corporate to have a nice guided volunteering experience, we can all win, So it's not just my CIC, because as I say, there's so many really great individuals around London. So they're not big, not big organisations. They're individuals doing amazing work. There's a chap called Ian. He's been doing lots of work. I forget his surname now. Ian Phillips, I think. He's been working in London Fields, just doing some amazing work on habitats there, for example. And as far as I'm aware, he just does his own thing. And, so it wouldn't be great to support and give those people a bit of extra cash if they're coming in, leading some corporates. The same with my friend Claudia as well. So, there's so many individuals out there that if we can all work together. And I think the forest school community is brilliant. There's brilliant opportunity there where we can all help each other out in this way.
Are you able to, I know lots of forest school practitioners do use their local forest school association networks to meet up and collaborate and share ideas and things. Is that something that's true for you where you are in London, or do you network in a different way?
Yes, so I am a member of the London Forest School Association, and that's very good and led by some really good people. I think it's a mixture. It's a mixture of people who are still doing, I won't say traditional, because I think it's quite hard to do traditional forest school in London, but they have greener spots and some of us tarmac warriors. We do often talk about urban forest school and the challenges that we have. And sometimes conversation is about, well, is it a thing in itself, and should it have its own training or CPD? And then I'll be honest, I think sometimes we go around in circles about it. Personally, I do think there's opportunity for CPD and better support, because I think I came out of my forest school training with the ideal, not the actual pragmatic sort of reality, to an extent. And I've had to teach myself a lot in the last sort of few years about how I think I can really bring the benefit, the spirit of forest school, if not every single principle and every single kind of the detail of all those principles. I do think we do hit 5 out of 6, but I'd be a liar to say that we're in a woodland, because we're just not. So
yeah, but you are, as you say, you accept that you might not be meeting the 6th principle, but then what steps are you taking towards that? If you're not in a woodland, you're renaturing the spaces that you are working in, so that you're kind of taking steps towards it. So it's almost like it's good that 6th principle is there. It's kind of helpful as something to aim towards, but you have to be, as you say, pragmatic and realistic about the spaces you're working with. And if we all just went, well, we can't meet the 6 principles, so we won't do it, and we won't use that term forest school.
We won't do any of it. Yeah,
we won't do any of it. And also, I mean, there's no law that says you can't call something forest school if it doesn't meet the 6 principles. And obviously, everyone would prefer that people did stay kind of true to that term, but at the end of the day, just because you're not meeting the 6th principle in its absolute pure entirety, if you then didn't call it forest school, you may well find that you won't get schools on board, because you contact them and go, hey, I am a urban outdoor nature learning communicator specialist. Can I come to your school? And they're like, what? Forest school is a term that people understand and they accept. And I think most schools kind of accept that they're going to be able to do it in their way. And it might not be the full fat forest school. And that's just, sometimes it's because they've decided they don't want a particular element of it to be the way that you would like it. So yeah, I think it's perfectly acceptable to call it urban forest school. And I can't see,
well, and also I'm having lots of thoughts about, I can't remember which episode it was in now, Women. You and I looked at their study about nature connectedness and what is the actual component that determines nature connectedness. And in that study, they were talking about, overwhelming. It's not about access to the space or regularity or the, breadth of the biodiversity around them. The biggest defining factor was a relationship with a nature-connected adult, somebody who will point out the nature whether that is, pointing out the nature in a forest or pointing out the nature in the cracks in the tarmac or in the, raised beds and all those things. And so in some ways, the role of the leader is not, I think you could argue in urban spaces, not more or less important, but just different. It's less about going you referred to it, Nina, as it being a colleague, and it's almost like you've got, if in an urban space, it's almost, I could imagine that you've got a shy colleague that you need to take the children to, or the learners to, and go, look, no, they are here. Look, they're here. This is the thing.
Well, exactly. I mean, you'd be amazed the amount of times when I've taken a child to show them the lemon balm that's growing, that's surviving, that somebody kind of planted 5 years ago, and it's like surviving an area of the playground. And I'm like, do you want to smell this? And they smell it, and the look on their face, and they're like, wow. And I'm like, that's a child's herb, that's for you. This is a relaxing herb for you, and it's also brilliant for nature. And just they're just so amazed by just the smallest thing, and just showing them a dead nettle and the flowers in dead nettles, and then it just and then perhaps if they find a caterpillar, I sometimes feel it's enough. Do we need loads of space? Can we still develop that empathy and that relationship, or at least do most of it? I know there are things which are very challenging, such as the elements of risky play. And I was going to come on to that doing proper urban forest school is hard, because you have to think and you have to plan. You can't just rely on a nice big tree for everyone to climb up. Even if you've got trees, they're often weedy and, sick because they've been trampled on by, 430 kids' feet. But, I guess what I'm saying is you can do so much in a small space, and I think we should be so proud of ourselves if we are managing to do that. So,
can I ask, do you have any so we're talking about small spaces now in particular. It feels like we've got to that bit where we're talking about not necessarily the depth of nature, but the physical size of this is a small area. Do you think, as someone who's rewilding and renaturing, and do you think you have insights on what I'm thinking about? Some people have a site and they go, oh, this is the piece of woods we've got. And then when you get there, you go, that tree is not in the ideal place. That really fucks where I'm going to put a shelter. Or, if the slope was actually on the other side, then this would make a lot more sense. But as someone that's designing spaces, not necessarily maybe from scratch, but from okay, we've only got 165 square meters. Do you think you have different priorities or different insights when you're designing a space as opposed to something bigger?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think what we're trying to do is balance. A lot of the time it's also playground. So the kids have got to be able to play. We can't suddenly just turn it all over to, a kind of a maze or a woodland. They want to run around still. So we do need to plan that in. But at the same time, we also have to say, hang on a sec, if we want to bring nature in, how can we balance that? So some of it might be accessible and the kids can rough and tumble it, and that's great. We want them to do that. And then there are some areas where we may say, look, this is a quiet space where perhaps you only visit when Nina's here, and these are the habitats, or these are the particular plants that we want to make sure that grow, because otherwise if they don't, we'll not be able to harvest the flowers and make teas from. Do you see what I mean? So I think it's about grading it in a way around access, and having that conversation with the kids as well, that not everything is just there to be kind of trampled and used. Some of it, they're sharing their space with other creatures, and how can we help them to do that? And even the smallest space, you can do that. I mean, I often get the children, they'll say, look, Nina, I found a worm, and then they'll be having a conversation to say, well, we mustn't pick it up, or we need to put it somewhere safe, or if they find a bit of rubbish, they're like, oh, Nina, I found some rubbish, and they're horrified that someone's left some rubbish there. And just these small things in a small space, it just make a really big difference.
Yeah. I was going to ask about the sort of principles of forest school. I've been thinking of, have you seen this new zine that's come out called Ruderal? Forest School for Social Change.
I've seen it circulating on Instagram. I've not read it myself. Yeah. It looks interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and so it's just top of mind for me at the moment. That kind of we've talked a lot about nature connection and the space, and I'm now thinking about I don't know, I guess more the social elements of forest school, the ethos behind it, the kind of holistic approach to education in general. And I was thinking about, the value of that for all children, I feel is so important. And just because children happen to live somewhere where maybe there aren't the most easy to access green spaces, which forest school couldn't easily be delivered in, does that then mean that, so they can't do proper forest school? So then they also miss out on this holistic approach to education where play is valued, where they are valued for who they are without academic benchmark, all these things.
Yeah.
Do you is that still like a really big part of your work, and is it something that you see
Massively.
and that schools see the benefits of, that you're working with?
Yeah, massively. Nobody ever asked me to do stuff aligned with the curriculum, and I wouldn't do it. If I did do occasional things, it would be an occasional thing. So, and I do find, and I'm sure lots of forest school leaders find this, sometimes when I do quite a lot of, I do have to plan activities, but of course they're just ideas to get the kids going, because a lot of the time I need to break them out of playground thinking. So we have to do quite a lot of that work to sort of almost retrain them to use their space in a slightly different way, especially if it's not fully developed yet, if you know what I mean. I don't want them to just turn up and start using the climbing frame. Ideally, I want them to engage with me and look at the playground differently. So definitely, but it's quite interesting because sometimes I'll be like, oh, maybe we could do this. And then they're like, am I doing it right? And I'm like, there is no right. This is a start. What do you want to do with it? And then when you really start to give them that permission, so, they'll come up with amazing things and do things that I was never expecting. So all of those other principles, such as it being learner-led, fine, I'm going to give you some ideas. I'm going to bring some resources with me because sadly somebody cleaned up all the sticks, and I've bought sticks before. I've bought sticks online.
Oh my god.
Yeah. I often do. There's a really great site called Hanging Wood. I buy my elder sticks from there. Yeah, I'm hoping to change that, obviously.
But if it's necessary, isn't it? It's like, I used to take sticks that I found to a school site that I was using because they had no sticks, and I felt mad collecting sticks in a bag.
I
know where I could find them and taking them in. But it's good that we're able to do things like this, because sometimes it's necessary, isn't it?
It is, totally.
And that's a really interesting point you make about you're using a space which the children have access to every day for break and lunch, and how actually you want it to feel different and distinct from playtime, because I've also experienced that as well, delivering it on a school site, and they know where the box of outdoor toys are, they know where the footballs are, so they're kind of can I just open the box and get the footballs out? And it happens, that kind of discussion happens quite a lot on the kind of Facebook groups around forest school as well. It's some people just want to play football, and people go, oh, I'd never let football happen in my forest school. And it's and it's going to be different for everybody, isn't it? And different for each site. But how to, as you say, get them to look at that space in a different way and go, okay, this is playtime and break time, but this is something a bit different and a bit magical somehow.
Yeah.
And that is a challenge, isn't it?
It is.
What tips do you have? Are there kind of sort of rituals and things, and just the way that you begin or end, or the way that you treat the space, that helps them to make that shift?
Well, I think it's about what I'm trying to engage them with. And, I have had the odd child who's like, oh, can I get a ball and play football? And I'm like, sure, if you can fashion one out of twigs, and I sort of make a joke out of it, because I'm like, honest. And then I'll say, you can do that anytime you like, but you're with me now. And, let's give it a go. And most of the time they'll continue to come. So they must get something out of it. They can't be that annoyed that they're not playing football all the time. But what they're really saying is, I want to run around. I want to do something active. So what can we do to keep those kids active? And this is why when I think about risky play and that kind of very self-led play, this is why at William Patten we're really going to try and plan that in as much as possible. So they don't have a mud kitchen. Let's put one of those in. What else could we do around loose parts? The kids that love to build, let's give them sticks. Maybe that's a big dead hedge that also doubles as a stick store. How can we think about these things really smartly? to be able to give those kids, the active ones, should I say. Normally I always have a group, and there's the run around kids and then there's the crafty kids. So you've always got to be like, how can I cater for them, bearing in mind that they do change as well. They move between those. But yes, I do have to work hard to change their mindset to begin with. But once they're used to the fact that there's kind of what I consider to be nature-y or forest schooly, and once they know, I always say I've got 4 kind of rules. One is look after yourself, look after your friends, look after the environment, and have a go. I just say have a go at something, see if you like it, or whether you can come up with your own approach. But if you don't try, you never know, do you? And that is often the way in, because then the child that always loves football would be like, oh, actually, I really like making clay mushrooms, and
Today's episode of the Forest School podcast is brought to you by us, Children of the Forest. Me and Wen wanted to let you know about our Level 3 Forest School Leader training course. We are down in Devon. Well, we're on the Devon-Somerset border. We're right off the M5. So anybody that's travelling up and down that motorway, we are super easy to get to. Our training is 10 days, not 5 like some people do. 10 immersive days in our woods, surrounded by all our amazing play structures and resources. And we deep dive over those 10 days into not just what's covered in the course, but also we do things like play theory, neurodiversity, holistic human needs to make sure that you're equipped to facilitate the best possible forest school experiences. We keep you on track with monthly online meetings, email support. We have a Discord server for all our students, helping you to navigate the coursework, and we provide regular feedback. It's not one of those you've done it and now you're out on your own. You have to rely on Facebook groups or people who've done the course before. We meet you all the way through the course, and our flexible submission options mean we can work around your learning style, including submitting some of your coursework as video discussions or as different things. We've had people submit watercolor paintings as part of their coursework, and that's absolutely fine. All counts. So whenever possible, we also visit your site and come and observe your sessions, not in an assessment kind of way, but in a free consultancy that's built into the course. We come and look and hey, I wonder if you could design this thing over here, or maybe your staff look like they could do with some training in X, Y, Z. We're there to kind of give you that extra bump up. So don't miss this opportunity to transform your career and make a lasting impact in children's lives. You can visit childrenoftheforest.com, and there's hyphens in between all those words, or you can email us at childrenoftheforest@outlook.com to learn more about our Forest School Leader training course. Please don't wait around on this one, guys. We only do one course a year, and we only have about 15 spaces so that we can give the right amount of attention to people. And next one starts in autumn of this year. So again, head to childrenoftheforest.com and get yourself or somebody else that you know booked on to that course today.
Yeah.
Can I ask, Nina, I mean, you touched on it in a couple of ways. You touched on somebody's cleaned up all the sticks, and then you were also talking about we're talking now about moving the site that's dual purpose, let's say, and I'm having thoughts about like hierarchy of purpose, let's say, that idea that it's a playground first and it's sometimes the forest school site. And I'm wondering, I guess, one, if there's ever any examples where that's been flipped, and whether, I don't know if you would, or if anyone listening would have any examples where it's actually it's primarily a forest school site and sometimes they are allowed to use it for playtimes and things like that. But I'm also wondering if you have any experience or have any kind of advice for people who are listening who have got these plans to rewild, or what's the equivalent of rewilding but for play? There needs to be a word, but we'll get to a verb. Playscaping, right? Let's call it. Someone's playscaping an environment, and because of that hierarchy of uses, they are going, we want to put a mud kitchen in, and the people are going to go, I get pushback because they go, no, because then they're going to use it at break time and they're going to get all muddy. Oh, okay, we want to put some freestanding den frames in that they can go, oh no, because we have a risk that nothing's allowed to be pointy in any way, and to, like, you know, do you have an experience of that? And do you have any, like, with your experience, like, do you have any workarounds that are like, this is how you navigate those?
So I'd say I'm definitely still learning on that. I think what I'm trying to do definitely as I renature some of the playgrounds is to make them more blended, as I say. So it's not just a playground or a forest school site. It can be all of those things. Do you see what I mean? And so we can put forest school play in there, which then becomes part of what they do every day. And wouldn't that be brilliant, to your point, if they were just coming out and playing in the mud kitchen or getting the sticks out? But you raised a really good point there, Lewis, because people get nervous in schools often about that type of thing. And I have had a few parents when I was like, we're going to do a mud kitchen. They're like, oh no, they're going to come home filthy. And I get it, I really do. So I think we've already had a few conversations about that type of thing. But I do think we will figure it out. And some of it is about education. So part of the money that we've raised, some of that will go hopefully towards me sitting down with the teaching staff and giving them some support and answering some of these questions about, you know, how can they use the new space? If we've got a load of loose parts there, how can they support the kids to use them? What they should worry about, what they shouldn't worry about, you know, those types of things. And with the parents, I think we will have to kind of see how some of that goes. Some parents will be like, I think it's brilliant he's coming home covered in mud. And others will be like, no way, I've only got so much money for clothes and washing. Can you please not let that happen? So I don't know, to be honest, how some of that's going to pan out yet. But I do think, it's worth us trying to find a solution. And I'm sure we can find a solution, I think, would be my answer on that at the moment. And it could be perhaps that there are certain days when they can use the mud kitchen or something. I don't know. Or perhaps it's not open when it's absolutely lashing it down for days on ends and it's a mud, quagmire or something. Or I don't know. But I think we will be able to figure it out. But there will be challenges ahead. There's no doubt.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're very open to parents' concerns, and it's a two-way conversation, which is what it needs to be, doesn't it? And it might be that you don't, as you say, you don't know yet, but it might be that actually some other people, parents, the children themselves, come up with the solutions that maybe you haven't considered. So that's a really good way to approach it, isn't it? In a kind of dialogue rather than I've decided and this is how it should be.
Yeah. Well, we have to be smart about these things. I mean, we would like to put a pond in, but we do have to think about how that's going to work because, traditionally schools get very nervous about ponds for good reason because children falling in them. But there has been a big movement about putting very small ponds in. So we're going back to the small space. If we could put a diddy pond in, bearing in mind...
Washing up bowls are great for little, dinky little ponds.
Yeah, exactly. And they can be. I mean, you do need to bear in mind that London can get to 40 degrees in summer. So that tiny pond might dry out in about 2 days. But again, I don't have all the answers to this myself. But what's been great about this project is when I haven't had the answers, I've sort of taken it out to the community and some brilliant person has popped up. Like one of our parents, he's head of horticulture at London Zoo.
Whoa.
I know, tell me about it. I was like, hugged myself when he emailed to say he was interested in helping. And he's probably going to send us some wood chip from London Zoo. It doesn't get better than that, does it?
Brilliant.
But
imagine the mushrooms that grow in that poo.
Well, it's been,
oh my god!
I know it's been nibbled on by giraffes apparently. So I'm going to be telling the kids all about that. Your
so
wood chip
cool.
was nibbled by giraffes.
That's so cool.
It is. It's super cool. But again, yes, we are lucky that we're in London. But there's loads of really amazing people who are parents and they send their kids to state primary schools and they've got great jobs or they've got great skills or. So we've got another parent. He's basically supplying all the wood for the outdoor shelter we've got planned, and his company are cutting it for us in like an IKEA flat pack style and delivering it. We then need to find the people to put it together, but that's several £1,000s worth of wood that he's just donating, which is amazing.
It's like leaning on those networks, isn't it? Really, and making use of them, and I guess not being I think my experience of being in schools was very much that I was, and maybe this is just to do with me, maybe this is not to do with forest school, kept in my corner. It was like, hand over to the teachers for pick up and drop off. You won't see this class. You're very much like, why don't you wait for the class on the field? We'll bring them out to you and doing that stuff. So it was like, my experience was maybe slightly more disconnected from, because it was all peripatetic. You're there for on this day, and then you're in another site on another day. But I think, like you're saying, it is super beneficial to build those relationships, and also sort of like establish yourself as not necessarily just the weird thing your kids talk about on a Tuesday afternoon when they come home from school,
crazy nature lady. You'll see her wandering around picking up sticks in the local park.
Put a face on it, put a thing on it, so that you got, you're blurring those, but not, I was going to say boundaries, those divisions maybe. But Nina, I've written on a thing because you just mentioned London can get to 40 degrees, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Presumably, and I say this as someone who's very naive about urban settings, presumably you must need to navigate a lot more microclimates than like where we are. The climate is basically the same as the field that's next to us, and the next field, and the next field.
I don't know, Lewis. Oh my God. Parents, especially at our toddler group, arrive and they're like, if they haven't been for a while, they're like, oh my God, I came to the site and I saw the thermometer inside my car go down and down and down. How is it like 6 or 7 degrees colder at Forest School always than the place I've just been, wherever that place is? And it is like our own little north-facing hill with its own microclimate, and it's always freezing basically, which is great in the summer. But yeah.
But differently, there must be urban microclimates that you have to navigate in terms of building shade or reflections from things, or it's like just so much concrete that it creates heat in different places. Is that something that you are aware of as you move between your different sites that you're using, that the microclimates are changing?
Yeah, I think it would be, everyone in London has noticed how the rain has changed. When it rains now, it absolutely dumps it down, and you get flooding the way we didn't used to get, at least in our part of London anyway. So things like making sure your drainage is good is kind of really quite an important thing for us to think about. But then exactly in summer, we can go through periods when it's absolutely bone dry. So we are, and scorchingly hot. So we are thinking very much about climate resilience as part of our project. So how can we make sure that there's good shade? Getting rid of the astroturf is absolutely core to climate resilience, because it can get incredibly hot, as well as being a horrible plastic kind of death of all nature. One thing I have noticed as well, we can get really strong gusts of wind as well, which is partly why we've decided to go for a shelter with a wooden roof rather than a tarpaulin, because we were a little bit worried about that, to be honest. So I definitely think there's a number of things that we do have to think about. There's other things as well, such as we work in a high pollution area, so we don't do that many big fires. If I do, I use a rocket stove, because I can't justify putting more pollution into the air. What kind of message does that send out? And I know everyone loves a big fire, but what we do is we often do small ones, which are incredibly efficient with my rocket stove, So I know that's a slightly different subject, but there's a number of things we perhaps have to think about that you wouldn't necessarily do if you're in the middle of nowhere. Could put a lovely big old fire together.
Well, even for us, and we're out in the middle of nowhere, then it sometimes seems you can argue the other way and go, well, there's so little stuff going on here. We would be such a massive percentage of the, contributions to go up what is an otherwise, which is why, shout out to the people that are sponsoring this episode, the Tawi stove. It's a carbon neutral stove. We capture all our carbon now.
No, brilliant,
that was
brilliant.
Smooth, wasn't it? So, yeah, I think that you can slice that kind of both ways in terms of fire.
And absolutely, the message is the same, isn't it? It's like, it's going, well, no, do we need to have this fire? Is there a reason for it? If there isn't, what
Well,
really
even
is,
more
yeah.
so if you've got to buy your sticks online. I mean, like, you know, that's got to be
Absolutely.
a factor as
Yeah.
well. You know, do you
I was going to say
go on, go on.
quickly, I think water is a really big thing we've been thinking about, though, because again, when we've been planning the shelter, we were like, how can we put in proper reusable water? So we're putting guttering in, we're going to collect the water. Then if kids want to use water for their mud kitchen, they're going to use rainwater. And we're trying to think of more and more things that we can do like that. And it's really interesting because originally when I started to do this project, I was talking about what can we plant that's native, native species. But then again, our London Zoo parents said, you know what, London Zoo, we think more about wildlife friendly than native species because of the climate changing. So actually, what really matters here? Does it matter that it's going to support wildlife going forward, or are we just planting things that actually maybe aren't going to survive for many more years? So I think there's also something really interesting about that. Which is why, personally, I'm also a trainee herbalist, so I'm mad for herbs. Absolutely, everyone knows that. I'm like the crazy nature herb lady. But I honestly think herbs are a great resource to have because they're quite small, they're resilient, they can cope in hot weather or terrible soil. And kids go mad for them,
Have you seen the orangutan that was in the news
Yeah,
today?
absolutely. I shared
my
that.
God.
I shared that
Okay,
with my
so we need to
herbalist
explain
friend.
because people will be listening to this and they haven't. So there's wild orangutan.
Yes.
People have been studying and made a poultice.
Yes.
It's like a salve out of a herb that it
Yeah.
had found and smeared it all over a cut on its face and like specifically on where the cut was and like.
It's
That's
so serendipitous
insane.
because last night I was listening to podcasts to go to sleep, and so it's obviously before I saw this story at all, and chose an old episode of Crowd Science on BBC Sounds, where the title of it was "Do Animals Use Medicine? Wild Animals, do they use medicine?"
Absolutely.
And they'd found this study of this chimp who was poorly and was with her troop, and she took herself off and made herself a nest and went to bed, but obviously didn't work, still felt sick, chewed up a plant that normally they didn't see chimps eating, but they couldn't really be sure that she wasn't just eating something that she fancied because she was poorly. And then they really looked closely, and she was chewing these leaves that were very bitter and sucking out the juice and then spitting out the fibres. So they were, well, she can't be just feeding, otherwise she would have eaten the whole thing. And then they spoke to local people, because obviously the scientists who were studying her weren't local to that area. Spoke to local people and they were like, yeah, that's the herb we use when we're feeling really pukey. It's really great for stomach complaints. And they were like, oh my God, well, yeah, there you go. Amazing.
Yeah,
really
well, we used to know all of this stuff as well, and it's a big part of what I bring into Urban Forest School, to be honest. So we've already put our herb garden into William Pattern, and I planted it with the kids and with several of the parents. And then I got the kids to write little signs against each of the herbs to say what their medicinal value is. So, we've got fennel for a happy tummy, and, calendula for your bruises and your wounds, and yarrow for a wound care. And we've got all of these little signs, and the kids didn't, and they're so cute. And all the others come out and read the signs, and they're like, what? Isn't it just for cooking? And you're like, no. And there's a little sign for rosemary saying good for memory. And I always say to the kids, before your maths tests, sniff a bit of rosemary, because there's lots of good evidence. It really helps you to, it helps wake your brain up and helps with your memory.
Or if you're Wem, you just sing a song very loudly in the middle of a maths exam.
Oh, don't go there.
Okay, that sounds like an interesting story.
Oh, just that. How do you remember that is? Well, when I was at primary school, I found
what herb
really
were you
challenging.
taking, Wem?
No herbs. I was like 9 or something. I'll tell you, the herb I was taking was Michael Jackson, because I was watching Newsround and it said that, a new study finds that listening to classical music improves students' performance in exams. And I was really struggling with maths to a serious degree, and we used to have like weekly tests of times tables, and I was always just like getting 0 on these tests, and no one was actually really helping me in any way to check why this might be. Anyway, I remembered this study about the music, so I was like, if I sing Michael Jackson's Man in the Mirror, which is my favourite song at the time, out loud in this test, I'm going to ace it. So I did, and then got sent out into the corridor for disrupting the exam. Anyway, that is very off topic. I wanted to come back to what you were saying about like native plants, non-native plants, right? Because this is something I've been really thinking about, and especially it's very interesting talking with you about like designing a space from scratch. So obviously, like where we are in a Devon woodland. It's got little elements of ancient woodland. It's got like native English bluebells, and things like that. So it's very site specific, isn't it? About like your attitude to these things. And so we don't go planting very much at all, really, do we? We've planted some apple trees in an area which has got a lot of light. And apart from that, we haven't really. And also it's got a lot of deer. So if we were going to make I'd love to grow herbs and vegetables and fruit and things, but it wouldn't last 2 minutes because we're not there every single day. And there's so much wildlife, it would just get all eaten, which is a thing. But when you're planning something, there's nothing there at the moment. There's very little there, and you're planning it from scratch. I think that whole attitude to like native plants only is like, also, as well as you say, kind of not necessarily being the most appropriate approach considering the climate and the location. I also think about like the message that sends to the people who are engaging with that landscape, because I was just trying to find the name of this book. I've read this amazing book, and I'll try and find it and put it in the show notes, because it's actually written by a gardener, and it's talking about her moving from an urban environment into a small countryside village where she's the only person of colour there, and she wants to grow things that are not native, not English vegetables in her garden. She wants to grow more exotic vegetables and things that are from different places in the world, and how people view that and how it feels to use that word like non-native or invasive, and what kind of message that sends out, and what the approach we're taking to plants and the approach we're taking to people. And that's a really nice way of putting it, about like wildlife friendly, because actually that book kind of made me open my eyes a little bit to that other way of looking at things. And then I've been looking at my own garden, which is quite established but has been planted years ago by other people, and lots of the plants that they've chosen wouldn't be necessarily what I've chosen, and lots of stuff from other parts of the world that just happen to grow well. And then you look at how wildlife engages with it, and you're like, okay, well, that bush there isn't native, but the bees blooming love it.
Yeah, totally.
And and like yellow archangel, but the variegated kind, which is a Victorian garden escapee, and everyone's like, oh no, you've got to pull that up. Well, you could pull it up, and it's everywhere in my garden, but yeah, the bees, and it's one of the earliest things that flowers here. So like, why would you rip it up just because it's invasive, in inverted commas, when it's wildlife friendly? And I think that's a really nice way to look at things.
I think it's really important, because this is the other thing. We've got kids from all backgrounds, and different things mean different things to them. I mean, I often do herbal tea parties with my kids, and lots of conversations come out of mint, because people either come from Morocco or they've been to Morocco, and the Middle East, sage, lots of conversations about sage. So and there's probably loads of other herbs I've not even heard of yet. So I'm always asking questions to say, what did your grandma teach you to use? Because this is the other thing. A lot of the time, if somebody did have a grandma who used to use herbs or have plants, and so there's so many other things we can learn. All stories. This is the other thing. These are small plants, but you can do everything from medicine to often dyes with them. Nettle's a great dye, so is calendula. Storytelling. I mean, so much from such a small thing. Yeah, it'd be amazing if we had a giant oak in the middle of our playground, but we don't. But we do have these other things that we can really lean on, and they really pack a punch for their size. So
yeah. The book, by the way, I've remembered it's called Unearthed by Claire Rattinen, and I went to see her speak about it. The subtitle is On Race and Roots and How the Soil Taught Me I Belong. Recommend if anyone is interested.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Sounds
really good.
I'm conscious that we could very happily chat with you for hours and hours and hours about urban forest school. But if, as we're kind of getting towards the end of our chat, where can people find out more about your work, and where can people sort of follow along with what you're doing?
Probably the best place to find me is on Instagram, Hackney Outdoors. And I would really, really be interested in finding other people who have the same challenges as me. Because, as I say, I do think there's greater opportunity for kind of CPD around urban forest school, and I'd love to really focus in on that network. And if people are really interested to come and see the school when it's done, let me know, because I'm sure we could arrange a session and show you what we've done, what's worked, how we use the space. So so that's probably the best place to find me. And I do all my renaturing work on there. If not, there's my website, which is hackneyoutdoors.co.uk.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been so interesting to speak with you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's not at all. I was going to say one more thing. The urban forest school is hard, and one thing which is critical is to have good assistants. So I wanted to big up forest school assistants, because I'm always looking for them.
Yes.
Because if, again, just like your site is so important, your assistant is super important. If you've got a nervous TA who doesn't want to support rough and tumble play, it's a nightmare. So, just wanted to give some love to those level 2s out there.
Yeah.
Amazing. Great. Well, thank you so much, Nina. We will, I'm sure, catch up with you again at some point soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, once we've done our project, and we've learned from it, and I'm on the next one, maybe we could do a follow-up.
Yeah, that would be great.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be great. Okay, great. I'm going to call it. Cheers,
Thanks,
mate.
Mike. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Forest School Podcast, you can support us on Patreon. It only costs as little as £2 a month. That's a Tesco meal deal. One Tesco meal deal a month. And for that, you get our eternal gratitude, and also lots and lots of free episodes and doobly-doos up on the Patreon, as well as me thanking you personally. So I'm going to thank Rachel and Karen, Matthew, Catherine, Gareth, Rebecca, Rosie, Julie, Rachel, Candice, Claire, Heidi, Louise, Michael and Anna. Thank you all so much for supporting this episode. We couldn't do it without the support that you guys have given us. And again, if you want to support the podcast and help us get more episodes and more interviews and access more things, then you can go to patreon.com/The Forest School Podcast.